How are you doing? Okay, so my name's Louis O'Brien. We've more or less introduced ourselves there, Sinead, except myself, I think, kind of. But so my name's Louis. I'm from Dublin originally, but I'm living down in the Thai at the moment. Have been there for 7, 8 years now at this stage. Um, yeah, I'm involved with Extinction Rebellion since 2018, really. Uh, I I just got into it. I just found it was a new a new organization, a new type of way of looking at it, based on I suppose more more outrageous tactics, I suppose, and I found it very interesting. I suppose I'll get straight in. We'll talk more about XR later on, and some of you are involved already, so it won't be new news to you guys, but we may as well just get stuck into the talk, and I'm going to share the slides here now. A second there. Just give me a second. Now, can everyone see the first slide there? Just the slide itself. Okay, so yeah, okay. So this talk, there's going to be 3 parts to this talk. The first part really is all about the science as it currently stands, and really the consequences of that science. Part 2 is we're going to be talking about what we're going to do about it, really, or what can be done about it. And part 3, we're going to have a broad discussion amongst the lot of us about, where you guys think this should be going and what you think we could be doing. And, we'll come up with ideas, and I suppose we'll learn as well, and we'll be teaching each other as we go along. Now, at this point, I really should tell you now that this can actually get really scary. It's like, some of you might find this like unbelievable, even surreal at times. There may be emotional responses such as grief or rage. I suppose the material is it's quite hard to deal with. But if there is an emotional response, I just want you to know that it's totally fine. It's a normal thing. It has happened before, and if you need to, cut out or go away, then that's totally fine. Don't worry about it. After we go through that, and that'll be the part 1, I suppose, mostly. After we kind of finish with the presentation side of things, we're going to have the broad discussion. Like, I have to say myself, even for myself, I find myself shocked and overwhelmed sometimes when I see the stats behind climate change and biodiversity loss. And I have 2 kids, one 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and sometimes it's quite hard to deal with. But the thing about all this is that it's based on hard, unambiguous, robust science, and there's no doubt that if we don't do something about this soon, we're talking major catastrophe. So I'm going to finish this introduction by reading out a quote from David Attenborough. So we all know David Attenborough. He's not a man who minces his words, and he's not pushing some agenda, or he's not a politician. I think we can all agree that he knows his stuff. He's an expert in his field. And he said, right now we're facing a man-made disaster of global scale, our greatest threat in thousands of years, climate change. If we don't take action, the collapse of our civilization and the extinction of much of the natural world is on the horizon. So, part one, science. Now, I suppose climate change really, it's fundamentally it's all about temperature. I'm sure you're all well aware of the fundamentals. I'll just go through them briefly. We're talking about temperature and how the global average historic temperature is rising compared with the historic average. The amount that we're actually talking about, the scale of what we're talking about, the numbers are fairly small. Like you might be forgiven for believing that the problem, well, where's the problem? It's only 1 degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, possibly. But when you think about it, the amount of energy that is required to heat an entire planet or the entire biosphere of a planet by even 0.1 of a degree Celsius is gargantuan. We're talking a massive amount of energy being embedded in this system. And like being no doubt at all that we're even tiny changes in temperature have massive effects on the global ecosystem. So when we're talking about climate change, the most important kind of body of scientists are the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC. Now, the IPCC are the gold standards in climate science. They were formed around 1988. They're a UN-sanctioned body, and they're made up of thousands of scientists from all around the world. They are the leading authority, highly respected by all governments of the world. And they issue these reports, they publish reports periodically. And the last major report that they issued was in October 2018. And it was a groundbreaking report, which basically found that if we don't keep the rise in temperatures to within 1.5 of the global historic average, then it would cause catastrophic and irreversible consequences to the planet and human societies. So I just want to pause there again for a second. Catastrophic and irreversible consequences, right? Catastrophic as in total disaster, and irreversible as in we can't get back to the position that we're in now. We can't go back to the status quo. And that's if temperatures go beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, the IPCC, they went in this report in 2018, it went on and it stated that in order to keep the temperatures to 1.5 degrees, we would have to reduce carbon emissions by 45% globally by 2030. So that's in the next 10 years. We have to reduce carbon emissions by 45%. And it went on to state that we have to also reduce carbon emissions by 100% by 2050. So that's in the next 30 years. We need net zero carbon. Now, just to put in some context, the temperature rise at the moment is 1.1 degrees Celsius, and it's still increasing. So carbon emissions are still increasing. So I suppose in a nutshell, that's what it's all about. And you could actually, finish the climate part of the climate change part of the talk right there, because that is the fundamentals of what we're talking about. But I'm going to keep going. I'm going to show you some data, I suppose, and some results from other scientific papers that have been published in recent years that kind of add to the story and add to the context, and I suppose explain the whole thing and why it's so bad. So the first is a paper called the Hothouse Earth paper. There's someone waiting in the waiting room there. Sinead, do you have that?
I could see that. Yeah, I was just kind of unsure about what to do.
Yeah. Maybe you could go in there yourself and say hello. And I don't know if can you go into the waiting room?
I can't. No, that's the thing. If I admit the person, then they will be in. It is someone who signed up, obviously. But it's what do you think yourself? Admit the person, then maybe invite the person to the breakout room straight away, or what do you think? Or leave?
If you can, yeah. Can you go into the breakout room?
I can
No.
go to the breakout room with this person. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. I could do
Yeah.
that.
Okay. So maybe that's the best thing to do.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Louis.
No, you're fine. Okay. So the hothouse Earths paper, and this this paper. Sorry, no. So this paper basically shows us the reason why keeping temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius is so important. Now, this paper was published by the National Academy of Sciences in the United States, a very prestigious organization, highly respected worldwide. And it looked at 10 different feedback loops. Now, I'll just explain what a feedback loop is briefly, okay, by giving you an example. So in northern Siberia, northern Russia is an area called Siberia, of course, and it is very cold almost the whole year round. The ground there is permanently frozen. It's called permafrost. You can actually see it there in the Siberia region.
Hello. Hi, Michelle. Hi, you're muted there. Can you unmute yourself? Can you see where that button is?
Yeah, I had problems getting connected. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, it is. I made it complicated on purpose because we had some security issues, so I wanted to make this super secure. Yeah, that's grand. What I'm going to do is we just kind of had an agreement that we would meet everybody one-on-one before.
Okay.
So, but I'm happy enough to go back to the main meeting. Do you want to go back and join it? I suppose you do.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. I know you actually from somewhere. I'm sure I know you. You look really familiar anyway.
I don't know, Green Party maybe? I don't know. I remember the Green Party up here.
Okay, maybe that's it. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, I'll talk to you later. Okay, I'll let you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank
Okay,
you.
take care. Oh. Make sure I make sure that I close the breakout room for you as well, and don't just leave you here all on your own.
Okay.
Okay.
Frost is melted, or all the methane is released. So that's a feedback loop, okay? And there's many more of them. Now, this hothouse Earth paper in 2018, it looked at 10 different feedback loops, and it found that at around 2 degrees Celsius, what happens is that a lot of these feedback loops actually start to interact with each other and kick each other off. And what you end up with is this endless cascade, kind of domino-like effects of feedback loops interacting and getting progressively worse and worse. And the paper concluded that what you start with 2 degrees Celsius, but that could very quickly jump to like sky-high temperatures, like 6 degrees Celsius in a very short amount of time. And you end up with what they call the hothouse Earth. So the next paper I want to talk about is, let's see here now. Gadgets seem to be working out. Sorry, guys. Ah, there we go. Okay. So this is a University of Washington paper that was published in 2017, and it was published in the journal Nature, which is again another very prestigious journal. And this paper, it looked at basically the probability of each of these of various temperatures actually coming to pass as things stand at the moment, with action or without action from humans to mitigate. And it found that there's actually only about a 1% chance of us keeping the temperatures to within 1.5 degrees Celsius. It found that there's only about a 5% chance of keeping the temperature to within 2 degrees Celsius. It found that the likely range is going to be between 2 and 5 degrees Celsius, with the median, so the most likely result at around 3.2 degrees Celsius. Now, you've horrendous consequences at 3 degrees Celsius of warming. I mean, we start with the Amazon. So the Amazon starts to burn down. Now, I know that last year we had lots of fires around the Amazon, and like it was very scary. Very depressing watching that footage and those maps. But at 3 degrees Celsius, what happens is that the rain cycle, which drives the rainforest down there, it's very dependent on heavy rains, periodic heavy rains. But the rain cycle actually starts to get disrupted and starts to change. And you end up with pockets of the Amazon which have dried out because it's not getting enough rain. And basically it just starts to burn down then and becomes more a carbon producer than a carbon store, which it is at the moment, or a carbon sink. But you've also got major crop failures. So I'm talking 30, 40, 50% of crop failures, like year in, year out. You're talking major flooding on a level not seen to date. Like, I know we've seen lots of flooding, but nothing like we've seen before. You're talking droughts, major droughts again, and heat waves. And this is all within the lifetime of our children. So I suppose one of the biggest things of all here is the fact that Greenland and Antarctica are melting and will melt even more as temperatures increase. So the rise in temperatures are causing massive levels of flooding or melting, in Greenland and Antarctica, and this will cause sea level rise and consequently flooding. So in some cases, cities will be uninhabitable, essentially wiped out. The map shows here places that will be most affected. You know, we've got places there in the United States, you've got New York, you've got London, you've got Mumbai, Kolkata, in India, and then Dhaka in Bangladesh, and then there's more cities all around, more of these cities all around the world. And the thing about these particular cities is that they're all massive, huge cities that will have to be essentially abandoned. But we've also got desertification. So we've got and rapid desertification. So the Sahara will grow far bigger north, south than it is at the moment. But you've deserts in the western United States, Mexico, southern America, around Chile, around Argentina. Got the Kalahari in southern Africa, and then of course you got Australia. And we all seen the fires in Australia at the start of this year. Kind of you nearly forget about them now with COVID-19, of course, but Australia is just utterly doomed. If that's what's happening at this level of temperatures, you can imagine what's going to happen at 3 degrees or more. So what does this tell us about what's going to happen, on a global scale? So all those cities are going to have to be abandoned. You've got the desertification as well, and all of these problems. And what's going to happen then is migration. So migration will soar. And the World Bank had a report, and it estimated that migration will soar to about 140 million people. So 140 million people on the move by 2050. Other studies have had it as high as 1 billion people. Now, I'm going to say that that's maybe a bit on the high side, but 140 might be a bit on the low side. So if I was to throw some, relatively conservative figures at it, you could be talking 200 or 300 million people on the move by 2050. So what happens then? What are you talking about there? And you're talking about conflict. So you're going to have some have-nots in some parts of the world, or haves and have-nots in various parts of the world. And you're going to have the have-nots trying to get to where where there's food and so on, where they're allowed to go, and you're going to have conflict. So, and war and all that war brings. And, also, I mean, with that many people on the move, like society just simply can't cope with that level of people. I mean, Europe was barely coping with the Syrian refugee crisis. And I mean, that's only 1 to 2 million people on the move. And that's actually still ongoing, which is, crazy. And, so Europe, I mean, we've got the jungle in Calais, you've got what's happening in Turkey down there and the deals they've struck with the EU. Then you've got boatloads of people drowning in the Mediterranean. Like, imagine 100 or 200 times that amount of people on the move. And like, you might think that, we're okay here in Ireland, we're an island nation, we're miles from the epicenter, but like the sea level rise will happen here too, of course. And I mean, even, we've got 2 million people living within 5 kilometers of the Irish coast, so we're not immune to this. And what about refugees? Are we really going to let boatloads of refugees die and drown in Dublin Bay? Is that really what's going to happen? So it's major calamity, and as David Attenborough said, the end of civilization is basically on the horizon if something can't be done about this. There was actually, I mean, just even to put more scientific numbers on it, or not even numbers, but quotes. A 2019 report by the Australian National Centre for Climate Restoration concluded that should global temperatures reach 3 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial by mid-century, the scale of destruction is beyond our capacity to model, with a high likelihood of human civilization coming to an end. So, like, the thing about this is that 2050, like, my kids will only be in their mid-30s by then, it's hard to believe, really, that this is coming down the tracks. So that's climate change, okay? As bad and all as that sounds, but it isn't our only problem. There are other ecological pressures. So we've got ocean acidification for a start. Now, the oceans are, believe it or not, are the lungs of the earth. They're even more so than the forests. They produce between 50 and 80% of it. It's hard to believe, again, like, you would think that the forests are the main producer of oxygen, but no, it's the oceans. And they produce between 50 and 80% of our oxygen. But they are under increasing pressure from all the carbon that's being absorbed and dissolved in the water. So they're becoming more acidic. The marine life is struggling badly, along with the fact that they're being emptied by us. And we need all of these ecosystems to survive on a planet like this. And there's also problems on land, like soil fertility, for example. Dr. David Wall from Teagasc, who are the Irish agency, the state agency which supports agriculture, and he said that soil fertility in Ireland has declined by 40% since 2006. The UK equivalent of our Minister for Agriculture said a few years ago that he estimated that there's only 30 or 40 harvests left in the UK before soil fertility is fundamentally broken, I suppose. But of course, then there's air, soil, and water pollution. We all know about the plastics campaign that has been going on for the last couple of years. And then there's tropical rainforests being cleared. Sure, maybe they won't actually burn down because they'll be all cleared by then. Because like in Southeast Asia, for palm oil production, they're being chopped down crazy, phenomenal rates, and in Brazil for beef production. So with all that, and with the problems with species around the world, there's actually there's scientific, broad scientific consensus now that we're in what's called the 6th mass extinction. There's practically no dissent on this at all. And basically that means that the rate of extinction of species is far, far, far beyond the natural background level. So there's species going extinct at, you know, phenomenal levels, and we're now calling it the 6th mass extinction. And here's some of the stats that kind of go along with that. So the World Wildlife Fund's Living Planet report in October 2018, it found that there's been a 60% reduction in vertebrate animals since 1970. So vertebrates are animals with a backbone. So basically all large animals mostly. There was a warning of ecological Armageddon in 2017 following a report which found that 75% of flying insects simply vanished since 1995. I mean, we can all actually attest, well, I can certainly attest to that. Like driving down the road, I remember when I was a kid driving down the road on a summer's evening like tonight, you know, and there'd be, you know, you'd have to get out your sponge and water and soap to clean all the dead flies and insects from your windscreen, because there'd be so many. But that simply doesn't happen anymore. You know, where have they all gone? So I suppose they're headline figures in when we talk about extinctions. But there was a major report by another organization called the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Service. Now, I know that's a kind of a mouthful. I have to read that one myself still, but they are basically the biodiversity equivalent of the IPCC. So another highly respected body of scientists. There's hundreds of them from all around the world. And they issued a report in May 2019, so this time last year. And it basically found that nature is collapsing all around us. It found that there's 25% of all species now facing extinction. And you think about, like, I've got 2 kids, you know, and I read books or whatever, and, you know, these little kids' books, they've got, you know, animals, they've got elephants and tigers and lions and all sorts of wildlife. But like, the truth of the matter is the mammals on this planet, 36%, and here's an image on the right hand side of the screen, 36% of all mammals are humans. 60% of mammals are the livestock to feed us. It's like bananas. It's absolutely crazy. And only 4% are the wild mammals, are these, you know, lions and tigers and cheetahs. So, like, the question is, and I suppose this is where the idea of extinction rebellion came from. Like, how can humans survive in this? How can humans survive when everything around us is dead and the world is absolutely in a catastrophic state compared to historic? So I suppose that's where, you know, that's the fundamentals behind all of this. So I'm going to take a break now from the science. I know that there was a lot of numbers there and quite dark material, and it's hard to get your head around it all. But I'm going to tell you, I suppose, some stories or anecdotes, some quotes really, about the situation, I suppose, and to give another perspective on it. So this is a quote from Douglas Rushkoff, who's an American professor. He's kind of technology is one of his things. This is a quote about a time when he was basically invited to speak to a group of billionaires, you know, the 1%. And you can find this quote on his blog online. So this is what he wrote. Last year, I got invited to a super deluxe private resort to deliver a keynote speech to what I assumed would be 100 or so investment bankers. It was by far the largest fee I'd been offered for a talk, all to deliver some insight on the subject of the future of technology. My audience was brought to me, 5 super wealthy guys from the upper echelons of the hedge fund world. After a bit of small talk, I realized they had no interest in the information I prepared about the future of technology. They had come with questions of their own. Which region will be less impacted by the coming climate crisis? New Zealand or Alaska? In the end, the CEO of a brokerage house explained that he had nearly completed building his own underground bunker system and asked, "How do I maintain authority over my security force after the event?" And this single question occupied us for the rest of the hour. They knew armed guards would be required to protect their compounds from the angry mobs. But how would they pay for the guards once money was worthless? What would stop the guards from choosing their own leader? The billionaires considered using special combination locks on the food supply that only they knew, or making the guards wear disciplinary collars of some kind in return for their survival. Or maybe building robots to serve as guards and workers if that technology could be developed in time. Now, the phrase, the event, it's a term that the elite are giving to the breakdown of society, and they're anticipating it basically. Apparently, it's talked about quite a lot in the elite circles. So we're going to take a little break now. As I said, there's 3 parts to this, but the end of the first part is coming up. I want to touch on one more subject before taking that break. It's quite an important subject, I suppose, and that's the idea of famine. Now, we all know the population of the world is growing. It's growing at a phenomenal rate, and it's expected to hit basically 10 billion people by 2050. So that's 2.4 billion extra mouths to feed. But what we talked about earlier on, as in crop failures on a huge scale, and desertification and flooding and so on, and superstorms, then I mean you have to think that famine is going to play a part in all of this. Now, of course, there's famines happen right now. You know, I mean, I'm not forgetting about what's happening in Yemen at the moment. It's horrible what's happening there, or Sudan, South Sudan actually. But we also have our own, you know, we had a famine in Ireland, of course. So, I mean, we've got it, it's in the historic memory here. It's a very sad subject, you know, we all know this. We all know about the famine. We all know that it's a very tough one. And I actually play traditional music, and there is virtually no songs about the famine in the Irish folklore tradition. You know, in Irish songs, there's virtually none of them. And it was just too hard to sing about or talk about. But I do want to read you a quote from a book that was from about a famine that happened in the Ukraine between in the 1930s. This is from a book called Bloodlands: Europe Between Hitler and Stalin by Timothy Snyder, and it describes the famine in the Ukraine in the 1930s. I'll just warn you now that this gets pretty dark. In Ukraine cities, hundreds of thousands of people waited each day for a simple loaf of bread. People appeared at 2 o'clock in the morning to queue in front of shops that did not open until 7. On an average day, 40,000 people would wait for bread. Those in line were so desperate to keep their places that they would cling to the belts of those in front of them. Some were so weak from hunger that they could not stand without the ballast of strangers. The waiting lasted all day, and sometimes for 2. Pregnant women and maimed war veterans had to wait in line with the rest if they wanted to eat. The good people died first. Those who refused to steal or to prostitute themselves died. Those who gave food to others died. Those who refused to eat corpses died. Those who refused to kill their fellow man died. and parents who resisted the cannibalism died before their children did. So I'm not saying that's going to happen in Ireland, but it is going to happen if this isn't stopped, basically. You know, it'll happen somewhere in the world and it'll increase. In fact, it's one of the things that Roger Hallam, who was one of the co-founders of Extinction Rebellion, he talks about this quite a lot. We're facing serious problems with food in the future. So with that, we'll take a break. Now, this is the end of the part in the natural sciences, as I mentioned earlier. We'll try and let it all sink in, I suppose. Now, usually in a kind of physical meetup, you'd take a 15-minute break here and let it all sink in and let people get a breather or whatever. But I don't think it's appropriate to do that here. We will just take a 5-minute break, I think. But I suppose it's not important to, know all the facts, or, because there's a lot of facts thrown around there, a lot of numbers, a lot of organizations and so on. What's important here really is to what's the idea here? What's the overall picture we're trying to get at? And to come up with an appropriate emotional response, I suppose. Like most of the time we go to these talks and, a couple of days later, we're back in our normal life. Now, of course, this time we'll be back in normal coronavirus life, but we're back to normal, hardly even thinking about it anymore. But that is no longer appropriate, basically. So I'd encourage you, take a 5-minute breather there if you want to make a cup of tea or whatever. But I'd encourage you to, if you can, just ask yourself, how does what I just learned change the way I wish to live my life? So it is nearly 10 to 9. We'll come back here at 5 to, if that's okay. Okay. Thanks, guys. Okay. I just want to check in. Do we have everyone? I can stop the share here. Do we have everyone? Yeah, okay. Sorry. Okay, part two. So what can we do about this? Now, just to let you know, the mood does, I know we got quite bleak now in that first half, very dark material. And this second half second part, sorry, does pick up quite a bit in mood, but I just want to touch on the kind of the bleakness, I suppose, just another, for another few minutes. I suppose to talk about some concepts or some ideas that are, I suppose, really important, and they are grief and motivation. So, as we've seen in the first parts there, there's probably at most like only 5% chance that we can avert disaster. So, 5% chance that we can keep the temperatures below 2 degrees. And you know that means there's a 95% chance that we'll fail. So this may lead to feelings of grief, but it's important to feel the grief and like not turn away. See, if we can really feel the grief and move through it, we'll experience basically a shift in our perspective from perilousness to service. But for that, what's needed is for us to actually engage with the material and engage emotionally with the material. So how does it make us feel? I suppose it's only then that we can, I suppose, move from this lethargy in many ways to action. Like for me personally, I've been watching climate change unfold for many years. I was actually over in The Hague or Den Haag in the Netherlands in 1999 for the COP6 climate conference, like back in 1999, and you know, things didn't look great back then, and that's back when I was a student, you know, you know, but things have just gotten worse and worse, and forecasts getting worse, and absolutely nothing being done about it, you know. I'll admit that for many years, for most of the time since, I didn't act on it myself either. I did nothing. Just thought it was too much, like too big a problem, too late to do anything about it, and that I was too insignificant to actually make any difference. Like I also had my own social anxiety issues to deal with as well, which didn't help. But what I found now has given me the motivation, I suppose. It's changed all that, and I now have the motivation to actually act, to do something about this. And that motivation is to do with future generations, really. And you know, the idea that I can't just sit by and let this happen. I know what's in store for us now. I can't just sit by and let that happen now. And then there's my children as well, future generations, my children. Am I really going to be able to, what am I going to tell them when they ask, like, what did you do about this, that, you know? And when I had the chance. So, you know, that's I suppose how I'm working through it. And the thing is that knowing what I know now, like, would I really be able to actually, knowing what I know now, would I actually be able to go back to the normal way of living without, you know, doing nothing about it while the world just crumbles all around me? I don't think so. So in many ways, like, what's happened has liberated me, you know. I'm actually happy to do something about it now, you know, instead of feeling guilty or whatever. But here's the thing about it, right? If things were to start to change, then we would actually see a big shift in our consciousness of the entire society, you know, one that moves away from the deeply narcissistic culture of consumerism that we're all deeply embedded in. I mean, we all know it's wrong, but yet it continues, and we continue in it. So this, I suppose, it asks us to step into service and be willing to do the things that might just make the difference. It asks us to make sacrifices. And the thing is, I think it can be really liberating. And here's, like, even at 5%, even if the chances are only 5%, I mean, is that not worth fighting for? So the big question is, what can I do about it? Well, here are what some people might think, you know, recycling, changing light bulbs, driving less. Like, these are all examples of things that you could do that might seem like a good idea in fighting climate change. But the truth is that at this stage, individual actions, no matter what they are just not enough at this late stage in the game. They also have a hugely negative, there's really negative consequences in thinking, you know, the idea of just recycling or whatever, because it gives people the false sense that they're actually playing a part. You know, you go out and you do your recycling, put your stuff in your green bin, and, oh, I'm doing my part to play, you know, I'm playing my part for it to help the environment. But it's so minuscule. All of these personal changes are so minuscule in the grander scheme of things. They're negligible, that they're just like, it's not going to be enough. Like, of course, I'm not saying not to do these things. They should be done. Like, of course, things like eating less meat, you know, eating local food, driving less, you know, these are good ideas, and we all need to start thinking about this. But at this stage, the only thing that can have an effect which is proportional to this problem is large-scale changes instigated at a national or international level. So what then can be done at a national or international level? Well, it turns out quite a lot. So this is the projected drop in emissions due to coronavirus. You can see there, you know, there's been various events throughout history there, throughout the recent history, I suppose, the last 100 years or so. The Great Depression, World War II ends, oil shocks, Soviet Union collapses, financial crash 2008, and they all had, you know, caused dips in emissions. But look what is forecast to happen in 2020 because of this coronavirus. Now, I'm not glorifying this at all. I'm not celebrating these emissions, because we know that, like, there's massive suffering out there. There's a lot of people who've lost their jobs, a lot of people in bad shape at the moment, and of course, there's 1,500 people who've died in this country from it. So I'm not celebrating that at all. What I am saying, and I'm also not saying that we all need to go into social isolation to solve climate change. I'm not saying that either. What I am saying is that when it's an emergency, when it needs to be done, we can do it. Anything can be done, really. We can make massive changes really quickly. So what has been done here in Ireland in the last couple of years. So the political response. And as you can see in this chart here, and this is from 2017, and this is the EU 29. I think is there 29? Yeah. Well, no, sorry, there's 28 there because one is empty for whatever reason. But this is 2017, and this is the EU. And as you can see there, Ireland is the second worst performer in Europe in terms of climate change. Now, I've actually seen the numbers for 2019, and I just don't have the chart for it. But I'm proud to say that Ireland is now the worst performer in Europe in terms of climate change. Even the OECD, like when you compare the OECD, Ireland is actually down amongst the worst offenders, like, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United States, the kind of rogue states, rogue countries in terms of climate change. And Ireland is no better than them. We're down there too. So I suppose since then, 2017, what has actually been done in Ireland? And I have a kind of a timeline here of, just some kind of important events that have happened since then. So June 2017, Ireland bans fracking, which is a great thing, actually. It was fantastic. And nothing to do with the government, by the way. It was all because it was a minority government, the opposition managed to get that one through. But in February 2018, the Dáil voted to ban future oil and gas drilling with the Keep It in the Ground bill. So that was in February 2018. But in March 2019, they actually, because of government delays, the Dáil had to go back and vote for it again, and voted again to ban offshore drilling because of government delays. May that year, May 2019, so this time last year, Ireland declared, the Dáil declared a climate and biodiversity emergency. Yippee! Great. But within a couple of weeks, the Department of Climate Action issued a license for an exploratory oil and gas well to the Chinese national oil company. Minister Bruton at the time said, fossil fuels are an essential part to the transition to decarbonisation. We are not in a position to talk about ceasing fossil fuel exploration. So the following month then, the government published its climate action plan, and it was huge fanfare, all the government plan, huge big, multi-department plan, and but I can tell you now that it was nowhere near good enough. For example, it envisaged only a 2% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions per year until 2030. So we need 45% globally. In Ireland, we actually need far more than that, because we're basically we import huge amounts of industrial gadgets, and we can import nearly everything, all the carbon emitting objects. So if we were to actually play our part equally, it'd be far more than 45%. We're also far more industrialized than the global south, so we owe it to them to contribute more to this drop in carbon emissions. So, there's some estimates say that we need to be going up to 80% by 2030. But anyway, this plan only planned to get to 23% by 2030. So that's nowhere near good enough. There's nowhere near enough focus on public transport. Practically no mention of air travel, practically nothing on reforestation, and then there's no strategy at all for reducing agriculture emissions, which of course are the elephant in the room here. So that's the Climate Action Plan 2019, nowhere near good enough. And then the following month, the government finally, what it had been wanting to do for over a year, it managed to kill off the Keep It in the Ground bill totally. So we didn't manage to ban future oil and gas drilling after all. And that was just on a technicality. So yeah, not good basically in Ireland here. The thing about it is though, is that we're not the only ones, in fairness. The UN warned back in 1990, the UN warned the governments of the world that climate change was a problem and that we're going to have to do something about it back in 1990. And since then, the carbon emissions have gone up by 60%. The reality is that the governments of the world are actively complicit in the destruction of the planet. It's planned, it's willful, and it will kill millions of people. So what could be done about this? Okay, so the conventional way of doing this would be to go out raising awareness, leafleting, emails to TDs, petitions, marches, protests, and so on. Now, these methods are appropriate for relatively small or mid-sized campaigns, but what we're talking about here, like there's scales of magnitude, and what we're talking about here is an existential threat, which is extremely urgent. The stakes are incredibly high. So, like, I'm not saying that these things shouldn't be done, but if they're the only plan, it's not going to work. There are too many powerful economic interests involved to stop these campaigns right in their tracks. So what does work? Well, what we're advocating is non-violent civil disobedience. So we know throughout history, history remembers like the likes of Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and these are people who made huge personal sacrifices, but they managed to achieve huge changes in their respective societies. So civil disobedience, it's basically breaking the rules, breaking the law in order to cause disruption, in order to gain publicity, I suppose. Now, I mean, there'll be plenty of people who say, "Oh, you're going out blocking roads, and all you're doing is annoying people. Sure, what good is blocking roads, And people, and the same people might then say, "Well, I agree with what you're saying, but I just don't agree with the way you're saying it." But the point is that they're actually talking about it now. It's in the national discourse. It's on all over Facebook. It's on News Talk. It's on the RT News. It's on the radio. It's on the TV. People are talking about it throughout the country. And the message is getting through basically to the powers that be that people care about this. We need, even if they don't agree with your methods, people do care about the ideas. Now, of course, non-violent civil disobedience, the first part of that is non-violent, and it's of utmost importance. So opponents are always treated with respect, and it's absolutely non-violent. We will not engage in violence. It's totally justified on so many levels, and there is actually plenty of data to show that you're simply not as successful when you use violence. So what does it take then? What does it take? What do we need to do? Well, first thing you'd probably ask is, how many people do we need? Or do we not need massive amounts of people to actually make changes here? And that actually is not how it transpires. So there was a study done on mobilization, as in how many people we actually need to make a campaign successful. And a study done by Erica Chenoweth there in Harvard, she's a professor in Harvard, and she analyzed 323 uprisings. And her study found that the numbers, how many people you need, are actually only about 3.5% of the population. So there's actually an example of that in recent history. You might remember the Arab Spring, and in Egypt in particular. You might also remember that there was, basically there was 1 million people in Tahrir Square in the center of Cairo, and they were basically peacefully protesting for the end of the regime. And the regime at the time was a dictatorship by a guy called Hosni Mubarak. You might remember him, like he was in power in Egypt for like 40 years. And so 1 million people stayed in Tahrir Square for a couple of weeks non-violent civil disobedience, and it worked. They managed to topple a dictator, like, as crazy as it seems. But you might think, 1 million people, that's a huge amount of people, but actually the population of Egypt is 20 million people. So 1 million out of 20 is only about 5%. So that's, an example, I suppose, of Erica Chenoweth's stats, or her research. So you might also think, well, that's not going to work in Ireland, is it? I mean, what are we going to do here? But it actually has worked in Ireland in the recent past. Again, we had the water charges. Now, I know water charges were a highly kind of controversial, it was a highly controversial issue. I mean, there's plenty of people who are on both sides of the spectrum on which, whether water charges should be paid or should not be paid. There was environmentalists on either side. But you know what? It actually doesn't matter what side you're on, because the fact of the matter is that it works. Like, we don't pay water charges now, and it's because of that campaign. So that was non-violent civil disobedience here in Ireland. So that's it. And that's where we come to Extinction Rebellion. So XR, as we call it, we're a grassroots organization campaigning for radical changes in government policy in order to stop or slow the effects of climate change. We're trying to change the current path away from extinction, essentially. The symbol here, you will recognize it, I'm sure. It's basically an hourglass, and it signifies, well, that time is up. It's now or never. So XR is dedicated to non-violent direct action, or NVDA, as a means of gaining publicity in order to get the country talking and acting. It was launched in the UK in October 2018, after about 2 years of preparation, and they had the full backing of over 100 academics, including Dr. Rowan Williams, the Archbishop of Canterbury. They also had the backing of George Monbiot. I mean, they were very clever in how they did this. They've got the science on their side, they got the academics on their side, and they got the journalists on their side. So they had George Monbiot, the prominent, well-respected journalist from the Guardian newspaper. And that was it. They launched in October, and it absolutely ballooned after that. So this is the branches here around the world, basically. And actually, this image is, I think it's from around October last year. So I don't know what's happened. I'm sure there's a few more branches in there now. Of course, things are much quieter now, COVID-19. But here in Ireland, we started up not long after that. It was December 2018 when we had our first meeting in Dublin, and it was kind of launched, and a kind of steering committee was tasked with putting it all together, I suppose. And then it was, our first actions then were in February 2019, and it went on from then, and we've now got like loads of branches here in Ireland. So here are some of the things that we've been engaging in. This was Rebellion Week 1 in April 2019, where we took over O'Connell Bridge for about 6 hours on Good Friday back in April. There's more images of different things that we've been doing on the right hand side there. This is Rebellion Week 2, so back in October. Seems a million years ago now, of course, but that was only last October. And we occupied Merrion Square South in Dublin for a whole week, and we basically used that as our base and went around the city engaging in different actions throughout the week. And up here in the top right was where we blocked the TVs in to the Dáil until very late, till they couldn't take it anymore. And eventually the guards came in and started moving us. But that was Rebellion Week 2. And that were some of the sort of civil disobedience kind of actions that we've done. But we've also been engaging in lots of creative actions And in fact, the creative actions have got us huge publicity. Like we were all, this is all over the papers. This was Bloom here on the left. This is Cormac and Sue, who went to Bloom dressed up really as Adam and Eve and Bloom in Phoenix Park last year. And they just wandered around, I suppose, and they were all over all of the newspapers the following day. It was amazing. On the right here was another, we were on the front page of another action. We were on the front page of the Times and the Examiner that day as well. Actually, Cormac and Sue met Michael D that day in Bloom, and you can see him here, he's applauding them. And Michael D actually put this up on his Twitter. This was his Twitter banner and his Facebook banner for a couple of weeks afterwards. And like, you know, he's not supposed to make any political statements, but that is a political statement if ever I've seen one. Yeah, so I mean, as I said, the creative actions have got huge traction in the media as well. It got us great publicity. So what do XR actually want? What are we campaigning for? What are our demands? Well, I'll go into them in a minute, but first I want to just sidetrack for one slide and talk about the school strikes for climate. So again, this is another campaign. God, you can nearly say it's a sister campaign to ourselves. Started up by the Swedish teenager Greta Thunberg. And this is this is an image from Dublin last September. I think it was September, where there was 10,000 people again on Merrion Square marching for climate action. So yeah, I know that we've been very quiet, as have the school strikes for climate since COVID-19, and I'm not sure what's going to happen in the next couple of months. But this is like the school strikes for climate. Greta Thunberg has the exact same message as us, more or less. So what do we want and what are our demands? Well, we have 3 demands, and here they are. So number 1, tell the truth. The Irish government must adequately inform the public of the climate and biodiversity emergency and communicate the urgency for change and the consequences for not doing so. So we need the government to tell the truth about this climate emergency, and we need to tell the public. Like, for one, I mean, only one reason, there's lots of reasons, but even one of them would be just to tell people about what's coming down the line. There are changes, big changes coming down the line. People need to know before these changes are instigated. Number 2, act like it's an emergency. The Irish government must act to immediately halt biodiversity loss and reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2030, while reversing all policies not in alignment with that position. So we need immediate and drastic reductions in greenhouse gases and reversal of biodiversity loss. And 3, ensure a just transition. All policy changes must be in keeping with the ideas of a just transition, where the most vulnerable are not expected to sacrifice the most. And this just transition must be made within a global context. So there's big changes coming. We don't want the poor to have to pay for this, as they usually do. So what is our strategy then? 1, cause disruption at a number of key strategic points at specific times in order to maximize impacts. This will gain media attention and hopefully catch the public's imagination. 3, use the opportunity to tell the truth about the situation in order to gain support. And 4, build this support until we reach the all-important 3.5% of the population. So what are the risks then? Well, there is risks when you're involved in non-violent direct action. There is a risk of arrest. Now, the risk is usually very small, and actually, in the 18 months that since we've started campaigning on this, there have only actually been 5 people in Ireland arrested, and none of them were actually charged. So the risk is very small, but there is a risk, and people should be aware of that. There is also some actions which may be riskier than others, and I suppose be aware of these things. Thing is, regardless of the level of risk, we always identify who's willing to take this risk, and everyone is, before any action, is provided with training, adequate training, to tell them, what the risks are, I suppose, like in detail, and how actions such as direct actions actually work in practice. Now, one of the big things about this is that even though we are talking about there is a risk of arrest, usually it's only a tiny % of people engaged in direct action who are putting themselves forward for arrest. And in fact, say over in London, or in the during Rebellion Week 2, I mean, there was 1,000 people arrested, but there was like 15,000 people actually taking part in those actions. So, you're talking only about a small percentage. Under 10% of those people actually were willing to get arrested and put themselves forward for it. Here in Ireland, as I said, only 5 people are arrested, 4 of them during Rebellion Week 2 and 1 leading up to Rebellion Week 2. And there was only a small few who actually put themselves forward for this. So there's plenty of jobs for people if they are not happy to get arrested. It's not such a big deal, is what I'm saying, I suppose. So yeah. So the thing is, and guess what? It's starting to work. So this is a kind of compilation of polls by the UK polling company YouGov, highly respected in the United Kingdom, and they do these polls every so often, asking various questions. What are you most concerned about? And in each of these polls, one of the options is the environment. So this is the percentage of people on the left who actually tick the environment. So 2010 up until 2014, steady, 8, 9%, 10%. And then in 2014, when the winter flooding and storms, you might remember that, it was a massive spike. And then it went back quickly to normal, and it continued on until 2018, when it slowly started to go up. Well, look what happened when the Extinction Rebellion protests start in London. It's a massive spike. So if you basically can do things like that, it really makes the difference. And it actually, it means that, people who say that, oh, you're just blocking roads, actually just causing mayhem and, annoying people. This proves that that's not the case. This proves that it actually works. So we're coming up to the end of this section of the talk now. I know it's going on a little bit more than we intended. It's 9:30 now. But there is one more slide before we finish in this section. I want to kind of take us back to, I suppose, the reasons why this is all so important. And I want to also talk about motivation. So, and it may actually be the most important thing of all, the motivation to actually do something about this. So we know, as we said earlier, that there's possibly only a 5% chance that we can actually avert disaster. And it's important to bear in mind that we may not be successful. The obstacles are huge, basically. However, from an ethics perspective and from a moral perspective, it's always worth doing something if it is morally good, no matter how successful you will be. So I'll finish then by asking 3 thought-provoking questions. I'll hand you over to Sinead after this. What does it mean for me to be a good human? What does it mean to die without regrets? And will you be able to look your children in the eye and say you did what you could? So that's it for me. Thanks a million. I'm sure we'll be chatting and there'll be questions and yeah, I'll hand you over to Sinead. If you're ready to go there, Sinead.
Yeah, thanks very much, Louis. That was really informative. Thanks so much. You're getting a few rounds of applause there. Feel free to react to anyone. Yeah,
Thanks.
would you like to just stop sharing the screen there for a second, Louis,
Yes,
and so we can kind of see each other for a second?
Okay.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I'm sorry, just to introduce myself, I didn't introduce myself properly at the start, apologies. My name's Sinead Sheehan. I am one of the coordinators with Extinction Rebellion. I've been involved for about last year. And the circle that I'm involved in is called Regenerative Culture. So on one hand, we're doing all the things that Louis has outlined, and the other is that we're actually kind of trying to practice creating the type of culture that that we would need to be in order to continue, I suppose, as a species, if you like. So that would be things when it's a lot of things, but I suppose one of the things we do is we listen to each other, and we listen to each other with respect, and we're all equal. So on that note, it would be great to get some feedback from everybody at some point. And I'm just wondering if there are any questions, first of all, for Louis, or just anything kind of strong in your heart that you're feeling that you kind of really need to say. We can give you a chance as well to talk about, how you feel after hearing all that information. So for some people, it might not be new information, but for other people, it might be. And even if it isn't new information, it can still be very intense to listen to the bleak, or to the dark parts, as Louis called it. Does anybody feel like asking a question about it?
Hi guys, Billy here. Just with respect to this strategy, obviously there's the disruption and then the media attention that then generates. You mentioned meeting or hitting 3.5% of the population. Is there the intention then to essentially change tack and look at a different approach, or what? I suppose what next when you hit that 3%, or where did that 3.5% come from on the strategy?
The 3.5% came from a study by Erica Chenoweth from Harvard University, and it basically found that for a campaign to be successful, you need about 3.5% of the population to be engaged, active. Now it's theory, of course. We're hoping that a 3.5% will do it. But what is supposed to happen then at that point is that with such a huge amount of people, say marching on Dublin, or even occupying, or maybe some proportion of them occupying for a certain time, Dublin, the idea is that the government will have no choice but to actually make massive changes, the changes that we demand. I suppose. Just to,
Yeah, can I say something? I think it's very much about people power, and I suppose people recognizing that, you know, they have the power. There are an awful lot of different ideas within Extinction Rebellion. What the main idea is, we need to change. We need to tell people what's happening, because most people don't know, you know, the information that was on Louis' sites tonight. We just need to let people know, so that, you know, how could we possibly carry on living the way we're living when we know this? So I suppose it is about mobilizing people to, I suppose, you know, to create actions that, you know, give us an opportunity to tell the truth, to let people know what is really happening and how important it is to change. So how that happens, we don't quite know. We really actually can't say whether it's going to be through this government or it's going to be through another means. We just don't know how it's going to happen. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. There's kind of a small kind of tipping point in a sense from that study.
yeah. Yeah, as Sinead said, it's people power. It's when you get the masses on the street, it will hopefully make a difference. Like, I mean, there is, like, during the Iraq War, you might remember, was it the first one or the second one? It was the second one, and the weapons of mass destruction and all that. In London, you had 1 million people marching on through the city of London, protesting and demanding that the Iraq War be stopped, or that the UK pull out of it. But the government at the time paid absolutely no heed to them, like zero, and just went to war anyway. And it's this particular case is always kind of looked at as what not to do, I suppose. Don't just march in through a city and then everyone go home and the next day it's over. We can't do that because, you know, they just won't listen. So something more drastic has to happen, I suppose.
Yeah, we'll say as well, we are running other campaigns at the moment. So as well as, you know, I suppose the kind of protests or actions, we also have like one that we started, for example, it's called Be a Hero, as in Be the Irish for food. And that would be encouraging people to grow their own food. And, you know, we have other, I suppose, actions as well that we're doing at the moment, which is, there's one at the moment where people are going to put their footprints, you know, just make a copy of your footprints and paint it, and we're going to place those around. So we have got some actions that we're still doing during COVID as well, just to try and keep the, you know, climate emergency in people's minds while we're dealing with the COVID emergency as well. Did anyone else have any questions for now, or should we go on to another part of the discussion? Okay, if Liam.
Yeah, I'm sort of wondering, are there any areas that XR proposes to be part of the solution? I mean, we've heard that individual action isn't the solution, it's a little piece of it. I'm living in rural Ireland, so many members of the XR group in West Cork, we don't discuss agriculture and agricultural emissions because all of our neighbours are farmers. Other people don't like renewable energy for different reasons. Others don't like nuclear. So in the end, is there anything specific that XR sees as part of the solution? Or do we just leave it to the government to tell the truth and take the action?
Yeah, that's a tough one. XR don't advocate any particular policy. So like I have plenty of ideas myself now what you know should and shouldn't be done, but XR don't advocate any policies because well, we want a wide range of people. We want people from all sides of the spectrum to get involved, and there may be policies or maybe solutions from any side, I suppose. I think the idea really is that we're not experts in, we're not scientists, we're just activists. We see a problem, we need it solved. So the idea is that we're highlighting the problem, the government then goes to the experts who come up with the plan, I suppose.
Can I add in a bit as well? If that's okay. Yeah, so as well as what you see XR doing, I think there's an awful lot that you don't see as well. So for example, I'm also in rural Ireland, I'm in Clare, and one of the things we did, Teresa actually on the call here, she's another person who helped out, was several of us got together and we organized a discussion between farmers, like regenerative farmers, and we'll say people who were interested in regenerative agriculture but didn't know anything about it. So I think, you know, we didn't really do that under the XR banner. So I find for myself personally, XR is a really good way to meet other people who are also kind of wanting to do that sort of work and, you know, create those discussions. And, you know, as I said, through the Be a Hero campaign that we're doing as well, we're trying to highlight, so you won't see really XR's name on it, but we're kind of trying to highlight issues that are there, like such as food sovereignty. We're linking in with other people who want to write policies such as Talamh Beo. So I think XR is a really good way to bring people together and network with other people. So there's the stuff that you see in the media, and then there's all the other very hard work that is going on behind the scenes as well. So what we really need is people. Like, we really do need more people in XR to do that work and to, you know, to come together and work with other people. So that's really what we do need at the moment. Teresa, do you have your hand up there?
I do. I thought you were going to talk about the time we walked out on the golf course in Lahinch and got lambasted for it locally. But that wasn't it. What I wanted to go back to was the policy change and you know, the whole thing about making sure that we address the bigger picture and the politicians and that sort of thing, that it's, you know, what we can do is small in comparison to what we need the system to do. But what I've noticed from XR is the magnifier effect. And so they've started to engage with Stop Climate Chaos and the NGOs that are actually working on the policy at national level. So they're kind of bringing the actions of the NGOs who are trying to push for change to the people who are involved in XR. And then those people in XR are carrying out what Stop Climate Chaos and Friends of the Earth are looking for. So they're contacting their TDs. So it kind of adds more people on the ground. And it's only through meeting TDs and contacting your TDs that they begin to see that there's more people who care, especially in this environment where the only thing you can do is maybe phone your TD or email your TD. And if you're lucky, you can see them at 2 meters apart. But I think that's where XR is beginning to show its real power, is kind of multiplying the actions that of those people that have been trying to do it for years, which I think is really important. So by joining, you get all the news about what you could do and who to contact, and that gives the government the message that there's actually more people than the usual group in Stop Climate Chaos and Friends of the Earth. So I think it's really important to be involved in it. So.
Thanks, Teresa. Michelle, did you want to ask a question?
Wasn't really a question. It was just raising a point about the. I know I live in the north, but from what I know about politics at the moment, there's discussions ongoing about government forming, and it's interesting that two main parties are supposedly having a dialogue with the Green Party. So it is an opportunity to take some of these issues more seriously. It's possibly only they're doing it from a token point of view to try to form a government of some kind, and they're sort of agreeing to stuff that they won't fulfill. But it probably is an opportunity to pressurize TDs at the moment, I would think.
I've no doubt that the Greens having a fairly strong list of requirements to join the government, that is influenced. I'd be fairly sure that has been influenced by XR and all the various actions, and the fact that Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil are open to these. I'm sure that's influenced by the whole campaign too. So it's
so it could be hopeful.
Yeah, I think we bring attention to some of the really important issues for the climate. For example, like on the Rebellion Week, on the Friday of Rebellion Week, we wallpapered the scientific evidence onto the Department of Climate Change, which showed that fracking was bad for the climate in so many different ways. So we actually got natural glue and we wallpapered it on. So it was all over the papers. It was a symbolic action, and I suppose it made them the laughing stock, really. It kind of, I suppose, like, the shame of it, listen to the science, I suppose, was the message. And, lo and behold, it is one of the red lines that the Green Party have been trying to hold in the government formation. So I suppose that is what we're trying to do, is try to find the issues and trying to find a way to highlight them. But as I said, we do need more people on board. Does anyone have any more questions before we go into another room, like a breakout room? We had some ideas, myself and Louis, for I suppose one of the things is that we believe that the people have a hive mind, I suppose, and what we'd like to do is, I suppose, offer people a chance to, one, process the information that you just heard. So I suppose talk about how it landed with you and how you feel after it, and secondly, maybe have a think about what might we be able to do, like kind of use it almost like as a brainstorming session for the people here, to, for example, with regard to the COVID emergency, is there any information or any tactics or any anything that we can take from that that we could apply to how we respond to the climate emergency? So the idea would be that I would break you up into groups of 2, and you'd have a moment, I suppose maybe 3 or 4 minutes each, to share with each other about those things. How do you feel about hearing it? How do you feel? What do you think about the information that you heard? And how might we respond to the climate emergency? What lessons can we take from how we responded to the COVID emergency in terms of how we could respond to the climate emergency? So what I'm going to do is break you up into 2 groups, and then I'll bring you back into the main session and we can talk about it again as a group and see where we're at and what we've learned. Does that sound fair enough? Okay. So I'm just going to put people into groups of 2 or 3. Let me see. And if you're in a group of 2, then you can have, let's say, 3 minutes each. And if you're in a group of 3, you can have 2 minutes each. Is that okay? So maybe if somebody in the group just takes a timer and then just talk for 2 minutes about what's coming up for you, about what you've heard and how we might respond to the climate emergency. Okay. Hello, Hannah, can you hear me? Hello, Hannah, can you hear me? Oh, hi, Martha. You were all here all on your own.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you called. That's really good. Somebody's on a sign. I'm just gonna assign. Which room are we in? Do you know? Let me see.
5.
Number 5. Okay. Somebody else seems to be lost as well. Let's see if she joins. Oh, so yeah, I got the time wrong there. I put 10 minutes instead of 6 by accident, but hey ho. Do you feel like sharing a bit about
Well, firstly, I apologize about my posture. I have trapped nerves, so I can't sit. So I'm very sorry that I am flat. I know it's not very professional, but I'm a chemist. I'm a PhD student in chemistry, and I'd gone to a meeting maybe a year and a half ago in the Science Gallery in Dublin. And I was quite busy and I couldn't get involved in much else in the interim, but I was always keeping an eye on it and what Extinction Rebellion were doing. But I actually have a huge issue with academia and the chemical industry and all labs in general and how they're run. Labs generate 5.5 tons of metric plastic waste a year, and they're a much bigger polluter than a lot of the coal industries and the meat industries. And as someone who works in a lab, I can't stand by and watch this, and how when we were doing all of our waste disposal, the waste manager in Trinity, which is where I'm studying, he said that there was no way to recycle the waste, which was just incorrect. He didn't research it and he just didn't want to do it. And that's the attitude that a lot of scientists and chemists are taking, that their research is more important than the world, because they need the publication and they need the research to work, and they're not implementing any practices. And like the freezers are at -80, not -70, and the water is constantly running, the lights are never turned off. All of these practices that are so simple are not taking into account. So that's the main reason that I'm here today. I really wanted to hopefully meet anyone else who wasn't working in a lab, because I really wanted to take this time to push the greener initiative in labs anyway. So, and yes, I am sorry I'm flat.
You're sorry, what?
I'm sorry I'm flat, not sitting.
Oh, no, God, sorry. We're making you turn on the camera or whatever. You don't have to. I'm just going to turn on the light here so that
Sure.
it's darker. Let's see. Oh gosh. Yeah, actually, funny thing is, I have a PhD as well, and it's in psychology though, so we didn't have all that, I suppose waste. It would be very different from chemistry. But yeah, I mean, those are the issues that we don't see. So it'd be really good to have your voice in there, and I mean, it's the type of thing like we can do is, I suppose, create campaigns around highlighting issues that people don't know about. So it would be really good. Like, whereabouts you're based in Dublin, did you say?
I'm based in Dublin. I'm based in Trinity.
Oh yeah, okay. Oh, so there are a good few people in Trinity, isn't there? I think there's a Trinity XO or something like that, as far as I know, isn't there?
There is, yeah.
Yeah, I know a few girls there. Well, I think Sarah Doherty is one. Maybe is Oscar as well. I'm not sure. There's a few of them anyway. But if you want me to, sorry?
I'm not active, but I'd like to be.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, if you want me to hook you up with with some of the crowd from Trinity who are.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm just looking at the time. Yeah.
4 minutes remaining.
4 minutes remaining, but I did, what I did was I said it would be 6 minutes long before we left, because there was another question that we were going to ask as well.
Are
Okay.
you living in Clare, or are you
Yeah.
forced to be in Clare because of COVID?
No, I live in Clare. Yeah, so yeah, I've been living in Clare. Yeah, about 4.5 years or something. Before that, I was living in Scotland. Yeah, no, I love Clare. It's great. I'd hate to be in Dublin now, like, you know, with all the restrictions and everything. Actually, we didn't mention that, did we? What we could do, or what we could learn from the. I mean, one thing I thought is just an education campaign, because I thought COVID did that quite well. Is get all the information out to the doorsteps. I think that people should know, you know, more about the emergency. Do you know what I mean?
Although I didn't appreciate how it was on such a high quality paper, and it wasn't easily recycled paper. I did not appreciate that being issued into my door by the government. So yes, I think that was actually really important to have the leaflets.
Yeah, no, it's amazing what they can do, though. You know, they could do an educational campaign on the climate, as you say, on, you know, recyclable paper and, you know, whatever, recycled paper or whatever. So I think we're about to go back to the main room.
It was lovely to meet you, Sinead.
Lovely to meet you too, Martha. Nice to chat to you.
You know, the visuals of the facts to be shared widely, and also the kind of what to, the how to, what to, you know, what next, and some real practical steps. I think that's where I'm at with it. Hi, Sinead. Hi, Martha. Oh, everyone's coming back in.
Hey there, welcome back. Just wondering if anyone has any words that they want to feed back to the bigger group about how about your conversation that you just had. Is there anything that you'd like to feed back here? Grania.
Yeah, so we were thinking that we're not, maybe it shouldn't be said that individual action won't work. It's so much that, because in the COVID crisis, there's a lot of individuals all doing their best and it's clearly making a difference. So we'd like to propose that maybe individual action works, but it's not enough as a message. And perhaps, I'm not sure if that came across in the talk as much as it could. I know that Lou was, I think he misspoke maybe. I don't want to like say you did a bad job or anything. Yeah, that's what I had to say.
Thanks so much. I don't hear you saying that he did a bad job at all. I hear that yeah, that individual action is something that can help as well as other things. I will say though that the individual action came about because, you know, there were laws, you know, and the government did make them, you know, to be fair. So I think, you know, the point is if we just leave it to individual behavior without the policy, it's probably not going to be enough. So I think that's probably what we meant to come across. So we can probably take that feedback so that maybe that's a bit clearer the next time. Would that be fair enough? Yeah. Okay.
And I'd also like to maybe add that I read somewhere that it was the oil companies originally that came up with the idea of individual action to draw the attention away from themselves as the main problem and say that it was on the individual and the consumer instead.
Absolutely, that's exactly it. So
it's actually still a line that's been spouted by the government, or was at least the previous government. The current, you know, the Fine Gael-led government.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did have a few more kind of discussion questions that we wanted to talk about, but I'm just noticing that it is 10 o'clock and people are probably feeling a bit tired, and you've been through a lot, a bit of a roller coaster in terms of your emotions perhaps. But yeah, so I wonder, would anybody be interested in information about how to get more involved in Extinction Rebellion? And if so, Louis, what do you think is the best way to share how to get involved?
Well, we have everyone's email. Let me see. I would recommend at this point for everyone to get involved with an XR group in your locality, if there is one. It's hard to do, of course, during COVID-19, but they are online to a certain extent, I think. At the moment, the alternative then is to get involved in a national group, which is organized in a kind of, let me see, it's organized on a forum called Slack at the moment. Everything almost is happening on this Slack forum. But it's a bit of a, for new people, it might be a bit too much. So, yeah. So I think the best thing to do really is to get involved with your local group if there is one. I know that there are a few people from Wicklow there, and there is no group in Wicklow as far as I know. So if one was happy to put in the groundwork, you could possibly set up a group in your own area. So that's how, say, the Kildare group was set up. It was just set up by 2 people from Kildare, and as the same was for every group. So they were just set up last year. Like the Kildare group was only set up last May, I think. So that's what I would recommend. And what we do have is in the national group is kind of regional coordinators, and we could take all the email addresses which we have already, and maybe we could ask for each of you to leave your location again. What do you think, Sinead?
Yeah, and also we have, so I'm just putting a couple of things up there in the chat as well. So we do have a newsletter, which is a really good way to get, I suppose, a monthly report, or just, you know, of what kind of campaigns are going on. So there's other things that we do. So as part of regenerative culture, we have empathy cafes. So we have different ways of discussing, you know, issues or whatever. Or, you know, there's, you know, different campaigns, and might be the ones about emailing your TDs and all that kind of stuff. So the group stuff that we're doing together, or if you have ideas for your own campaigns, it could be a good way just to start if you want to get mailed the newsletter. So I do have all your emails. So either maybe if you don't want the newsletter, I could just add you in to receive the newsletter, or maybe just message me if you don't want it, or message me if, you know, if anything really. Is there anyone, are you all happy enough to be added to the newsletter? Oh, Teresa, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say that there's also the Extinction Rebellion Facebook page, and they're doing live information sessions kind of every week, and we'll also share the Stop Climate Chaos and that. There's other groups doing live information sessions, which brings about an audience that you might meet other people as well. So it's no harm to get in touch. And there's also the activist club and loads of stuff on Facebook, I think, to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy to be on the email list.
What was that about email list?
I'm happy to be on the email list.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Billy, did you have something you were going to say there? I thought you were putting your hand up for a second.
Nope, just happy to be on the email list.
Okay, is there anyone who isn't happy to be on the email list? That might be too embarrassing to say, but
I'm already on it.
okay. Okay, great. Well, it's getting on there. Was there anything else that
Is there anyone who doesn't have XR group locally or doesn't know of any XR groups locally? Grania?
Yeah, I'm in one, but I'd love there to be a Wicklow one.
Okay, yeah. A good way of getting that, getting one set up really would be to, well, the way the Kildare one was set up, again, this was in non-COVID times, so maybe a bit more difficult now, but was hold a talk in Wicklow town or wherever in Wicklow, and you basically set up a WhatsApp group to following, you know, for any members who would like to be involved, and then you have weekly meetings or monthly meetings or whatever it is, and you can get any, like, my brother's in Wicklow town, so I'd be happy to come and give a talk there.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
When we're allowed, of course. So it may have to wait until then, but like if you're happy to, you know, help me set it up, I can help you, I suppose. Help you set it up.
Sounds good.
So
great?
yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Louis, I can give you Grania's email afterwards if that's okay with you, Grania.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, well, it was fantastic to have you all, and I'm delighted that you made it all to the call. And I think that's probably about time to call it a night, unless there's anything else. No.
Thanks for your time, folks. Yeah, really got a lot from the evening. So thanks so much for your time as well. Really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to connecting more.
Yeah, thanks, Louis and Sinead. Well done.
Thanks, Lou.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks very, very much.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.